Right, you may start.
All right, thank you. My general pronoun is he or him. My POV preference is through chat box. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think that the team that can win this debate is the team that can prove that actually in the future a Palestinian state or a statehood, a state could actually be achievable and could actually could actually run. And second of all, how exactly in this current reality, in the current situation, we can stop the war. Right? We think that the only way to stop the amount of aggression that Israel is bombing, literally bombing down upon Gaza, is to keep, as a Palestinian authority, is to keep on not collaborating with Hamas and not really associating yourself with Hamas. We think that the moment when Palestinian Authority seek collaboration with Hamas or try to even associate themselves with Hamas is the moment where Israel have not the justification to even make the war even bigger, and casualties were more likely going to be a lot higher in their side, right? But before I jump into my substantive, several responses towards the government side of the house. I think you cannot buy the idea of how exactly we could win the war simply because we know better tactics, we know the geographical area is just like the same with Vietnam War. We think that this, to begin with, is a very asymmetrical war that happened within Israel and Palestine, in which Palestine does not really have a probable chance to even win the war, even if Palestinian Authority collaborate with Hamas. What you need to understand, the main difference between Vietnam War and the war within Israel and Palestine is that the people in Vietnam are there for such a long time, and then the US came in and they don't know what to expect. The idea with Palestinian and Israel is that both of the government or both the entities are there to begin with in the land. Therefore, if you wanted to have a geographical knowledge advantage, well, Israel have that anyway. And the fact that we have a lot of they have a lot of like super good technologies in terms of war are most likely going to give them an advantage and also give them a much probable chance to win. Therefore, we think that going into war with Israel is not a really good thing to do, simply because you as a government, your main focus and priority should always be how to stop the war or even limiting the casualties of your own citizens, right? But second of all, when they say that, well, external support only comes from Hamas, for example, like how Iran actually gave us several military support. No, thank you. We think that this is not untrue, right? We think that the existence of Palestinian Authority who controls West Bank actually have several other external support as well. We have seen a lot of people who recognize Palestinian Authority as a legitimate Palestinian government in which they wanted to push for a two-state solution, for example. So therefore, we think that the idea of only having support simply due to the fact that we have to support Hamas because right now they are being supported by anyone else it's not true, right? Simply right now, why do you see a lot of people actually supporting Hamas and actually giving them military support? Simply because they are being invaded right now, they are being attacked against by Israel. That's why we see a lot of support. But Palestinian Authority in itself, as a legitimate government that are recognized by Israel, is somewhat we have our own connection and we have our own relationship with external state as well. So therefore, we think that it's still likely, even if you don't work with Hamas, you will most likely going to still have the help that you need in order to create a functioning state. But before I jump into my substantive, I'll take closing.
So the counterfactual in your side is actually a constant conflict between Hamas and PA based on the historical precedents that is costly and brutal.
Yeah, we think that we will still take the idea of keep on fighting between Palestinian Authority and Hamas. In the comparative is if we keep on if we don't fight and we don't collaborate, and the moment we collaborate, the fight is not about Palestinian Authority versus Hamas anymore. It's about Palestinian Israel, right? And the moment that happened, we think that it could actually be much more worse for the Palestinian as a whole. More under my substantive. I'm moving on to my substantive. I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about how exactly associating ourselves or collaborating ourselves with Hamas will most likely going to worsen the war, or even pushes down the idea of a ceasefire. And later I'll also talk about how exactly the ultimate goal of Palestinian Authority and Palestinian people as a whole is to have a state in which the most likely outcome is a two-state solution. First, on how collaborating would prolong the war or even push down the idea of a ceasefire. We think that the moment you collaborate with Hamas currently right now, you sided and you say to the world that we are one and we actually collaborate with one another and we work together to fight Israel. This is going to be harmful. Why? if the opening government told you that it will limit casualties, we think that the casualties will be a lot higher under our side. If Palestinian Authority started to collaborate with Hamas, then Israel knows that they have one enemy, which is like the Palestinian Authority and also Hamas. This gives them the idea of how they could actually go on a bigger war in which they will let in which led into them fighting and even killing all of the Palestinians, not only the people in Gaza Strip but also in the West Bank. Because right now, what happened is that Israel only focuses on Hamas because they think the Palestinian Authority is not a threat and Hamas is the only entities that they need to eradicate. The moment when you collaborate with Hamas is the moment when you admit that we are a part of the problem and we also want it to be eradicated by Israel. This will causes much more casualties and much more Palestinian dying under their side, right? But also, not to mention, what the most important thing is about ceasefire. We think that the idea of the current war that is happening in Gaza Strip, the most probable outcome or the most outcome that is best for everyone is ceasefire, right? We think that the moment you collaborate with Hamas is the moment you lose your leverage to have a ceasefire to begin with. We think that the existence of Palestinian Authority currently, who govern under West Bank, is an assurance or even a leverage towards Israel that if, for example, Hamas, you can defeat Hamas, for example, there are another authority that can take place and in order to create a much better governing system, which is Palestinian Authority. The moment you collaborate with Hamas, you give out the leverage of having a ceasefire, because ceasefire could only happen right now if we have an authority or an entity that could actually go into Gaza and be better than Hamas. The moment you collaborate with them, meaning that Israel will not see you as a leverage anymore and not see you as an entity that could actually help them control Gaza and the entire territory of Palestinian, right? But also on the point of two-state solution, we think that what we need to actually accept is that the most possible state solution that currently is in reality is two-state solution, right? And the only way to do this is to not collaborate with Hamas, because Hamas is known for how they don't like the two-state solution, and even they antagonize Israel to the point where they wanted Israel to vanish and whatnot, right? The only thing that could help us gain international support and gain international backing is through not to collaborate with Hamas and stick with our own idea and agenda as a Palestinian authority, as a sovereign entity. Therefore, we are really proud to oppose that.
And then the speaker for the final speech, to continue the case of Gulf, calling upon PM. Time is yours.
Hi, checking if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay. We are through chat, preferably at 5 minutes, preferably to closing for short diagonal. Just refer me as my speaking position. Also, as per constitutions, anything mentions within my speech and my partner's speech is may or may not reflect upon our own values. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Respected chamber, under the idea of opening government, what they are trying to encourage when they want to seek collaborative with Hamas is basically an ever war against Israel and an ever-ending casualties of Palestinian people. The way us as a Palestinian authorities would not collaborate with Hamas is the only way for us to actually achieve ceasefire and to achieve less casualties, but still maintain our authority as a legitimate state, and why then and also going to become a leverage to in the future, specifically to become a proper country, to become a proper state where we can actually govern our people of Palestinian and protect ourselves from the Israelis at the end of the day, right? Come to the idea of opening government. Essentially, the idea of opening government, like my previous member mentioned to you, is that what will happen if we still collaborate with Hamas is basically going to encourage Israel to keep on attacking and also invading against the Palestinians, especially in Gaza. Right? This is not something that we want under two main ideas. Number one is going to basically encouraging the ever-ending war, and second is going to encourage an ever-ending civilization casualties of our civilian. We do not want that, because at the end of the day, exactly like the way opening government say, that it's government responsibility to protect them. But I'm going to prove to you at their own case that this government responsibility has failed if they seek collaborative with Hamas. And all of my responses will be integrated on my argument. Now, come to the constructive of opening opposition. I believe that at the end of the day, within this debate, two things that what needs to be proven. Which team can actually explain which side achieve a better and much more effective statehood. Number two, which team can actually prove that they can mechanize and manifest their statehood benefits at the end of the day. But come to the idea of opening opposition. I guess in opening oppositions, why we believe that in our side of the house, when even we want to go towards the two-state solution, is something that are very okay, because essentially we're trying to maintain our statehood. Like I mentioned, under the idea of government responsible, we're going to take over opponent government, because in our case, when we want to maintain our statehood as a Palestinian Authority, is basically to prevent our people from being killed, and to also to allow them to have a life of a normal state. Now, this is something that are very important, right? Because as a state, you have a responsibility to protect and also to maintain the livelihood of your society. The problem when you opt into government proposal is you encourage them to become a martyr, to become those soldiers in order to take over Israel. The issues are, you need to understand that war against Israel is never asymmetrical. In no way of the world can actually Palestinian Authority are able to apprehend the Israel in the idea of just war or even in warfare anyway. Why is that the case? We have different starting point when it comes to military. We have different understanding when it comes to developing their equipment of military. We have different idea of the backing and support from the international community, essentially, because Israel are backed from the United States of America. This is why then the war against Israel is very asymmetrical. It is important for us to not go towards that road, because what will happen is just basically that you're going to suffer through the idea of casualties. Right? That's why we don't want to opt in with the government proposal. But the idea of state responsibility is that state sovereignty is widening something that are very important on our side, because when we wanted to go to two-state solution, where the Palestinians are being protected by our two-state solution, it is the only way for us, and the only way for the states to actually maintain and provide a much better living condition. The problem then, this is exclusive on our side, because in governments of the house, you will never able to prove to us why is it important for you when you become a one-state solution, or when you are able, or in let's be charitable, you are able to take over Israel. How are you going to protect? How are you going to provide for your citizen? Because it's impossible for you to achieve that, because the way you achieve that, or the means to actually achieve those ends, is somewhat going to be condemned by the international community, especially the United States of America. You're going to invite them to invade you anyway. That's why it's important and it's hard for you to protect their livelihood anyway. In our case, when we actually able to become a two-state solution, we can actually maintain our society and give them the livelihood. Why is it more likely on our side? Because within our state sovereignty, it's going to be subject to international law and conduct, meaning that it's going to be protected under the international law. Essentially, no one can actually invade you without any casus belli. At the end of the day, you can actually protect it by the government, and then you can actually also have a say in the United Nations, meaning that any country that's going to attack you, you can actually be defended by international community. The problem right now, why Palestinians cannot actually get defense in the international community, because majority of the country cannot really acknowledge Palestinians as a state, right? This is the problem right now, which is why if we actually seek collaborative towards Hamas, is going to become a regress from our current starting point. That's why we don't want, right? On the other side, that's why it is important for us, because this is the government responsibility, the idea of government that we're going to argue. Is that one of the responsibility is to ensure livelihood, and livelihood exclusively exists on our side. So in conclusion, if you want to argue about government responsibility, in our case, we can actually manifest of government responsibility. Number two, if you argue about, we need to rely on Hamas, this is very problematic. Understand that Hamas, this is why we actually have this debate, because Hamas are the one that start this war and create even more suffrage towards Palestinians, especially in Gaza, right? The problem of Hamas is basically this person is a very rogue actor, meaning that they are very uncontrollable, and very uncertain. The only reason why we have this debate is because when he just want to attack Israel at a certain amount of time. That's why we start the everlasting conflict becoming even more bigger, right? Because now, because of the fact that he start those war, Israel retaliate at the six. This is the problem then, why it's important we cannot actually rely on Hamas as a Palestinian Authority. Just because of the portrayal of this is how he act alone, imagine how he's going to act when we actually collaborate with them. This is important for us because we do not need any more uncertainty and uncontrollability uncontrollability in our Palestinian Authority. That's why it's important for us to stray away from Hamas anyway. That's why those manifest, in conclusion, the actor that they rely on is somewhat unreliable anyway, right? Now come to the second idea, which is which team actually manifest the statehood benefit, right? In governments of the house, they argue that, oh, we wanted to give a much better investment or much more development towards agriculture, etc., etc. It's important for you to understand it's unlikely to happen, because when you actually conquer Israel, surprisingly, you're going to be very hard for you to actually making your nation building, because at the end of the day, retaliation of international community, or at least the people that actually back the Israel government, are going to retaliate towards you, meaning that you need to actually heavily invest on defense and military, and you cannot actually gain the idea of making agriculture development, la la la. The problem in governments, in opposition, at least because we take it in a much more diplomatic way, it is exists, the urgency to create a bigger military is unlikely. That's why we're very proud to oppose.
And then a speaker for the final speech to open the case of closing government, calling upon member of GOV, that is yours here.
Check. Am I audible and visible?
Yep.
Okay. The Beatles has just released their final song, so I cannot help to use this virtual background. And also, anything I said in my speech is not my opinion, it's just for the debate, so jangan tersinggung ya. Yeah. QI, unmute yourself. Prioritizing OO, do no promises because I have so many to bring. And yeah, right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. OG, let's kick out the opening debate here. Like, OG is too utopic. Like, Blue literally wants to win the war 30 seconds after saying that US and Israel is too powerful. Like, settle your identity, and ultimately, even if like you're still going to increase the delta likelihood of winning, 1% chance to winning to 10% is still too minor. They cannot win the debate this way. And 2, look, Palestinian Authority is already the moderate one, and look at what happens now. Nothing happens except continuous war. OO, on the other hand, thankfully they point out OG's false logic, but they are too dystopic. Fam, house divided against itself cannot stand. Even Lincoln with a hole in his head knows that. And even if you're fighting spending your resources fighting Hamas instead, you are wasting the resources necessary to defend yourself from the Israel. They cannot win this debate under that identity either. So 2 points of setup under CG. 1, we would collaborate, meaning we would enter coalition with the Hamas, enter power sharing agreement, more trade and more security pact. And secondly, Palestine area is split, right? The eastern part ruled by Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, which is more moderate, and West Bank is ruled by Hamas, which is more extreme. But both want two-state solution because they won't win and they don't want to win, and better off to strike a deal other than the entire Palestinian population getting obliterated, just as what happened under the opening debate. 1 point of extension, which is the political legitimacy of the PA. Let's characterize the Palestinian public. 1, their area is split, but they are recognizing themselves as one, and they are the democratic state. Sure, there is 2 democratic states in the Middle East, and that is Palestine and Israel. And in the last election in 2006, Hamas won most votes and most seats, with Fatah being the second. And the next election delayed continuously by the Palestinian Authority, exactly because polls consistently shows that Hamas keep on winning, meaning that public wanted Hamas, and Palestinian Authority dominated by Fatah, meaning they are taking conscious effort to exclude Hamas from power. This is problematic. Why? Because Hamas control half the country and half of the population vote for Hamas. Denying their power, meaning that you deny the will of the people. And Hamas, on the other hand, becoming more extreme, because they want to appeal to their own base, and they don't need to answer to the Palestinian Authority. There is no check and balances whatsoever. While Palestinian Authority, being the legitimate power, they are recognized and continuously negotiated with Israel and the West always come up with stride to peace, always hampered by Hamas on the other hand. Look at the recent example, for example, the invasion, for example. This is bad because one, the Muslim world still support Hamas, and two, public even get more supportive to Hamas. Hamas is seen as the defender while PA doing absolutely nothing, half-assed in defending Palestine, public backlash against the Palestinian Authority. Meaning that in status quo, the authority of the PA is already been questioned both by the West because they cannot control Hamas, and two, by the public because they didn't support Hamas to begin with. However, by collaborating, you are putting yourself in a more moderate position. You are moderating Hamas to begin with. This is likely because all Hamas wants throughout these years is just legitimacy. They won the election, they stick with the democratic principle, they have a very strong power base. However, they are still out of power, still recognized as a terrorist organization. Therefore, to counterbalance this, they become more extreme just to show their strength, that they are still powerful. Invading the Israel, for example, recently, to show that they are powerful militarily and powerful in public appeal, in the process hampering Palestinian Authority peace effort. The manifestation, if you are collaborating, is that one, they have no urgency to show off power. They already recognized as powerful anyway, and they have the voice inside the government. One, it will calm the public down. You are showing a united front inside the Palestine, therefore the legitimacy in front of the public safe. And exactly because Hamas have responsibility in the government, they have no incentive to sabotage any peace deal. And if Palestinian Authority failed exactly because of their sabotage, they are also going to be harmed in the eyes of the public. But preempting CO, why Hamas won't overrun the Fatah in this way? 3 reasons. One, extremism just won't work because if Hamas becoming more extreme, they are going to harm more people if they carelessly attack, not just the West Bank, but also the East. And two, overrun, because overrunning meaning you are becoming the leader of PA, meaning any failure if on the PA will squarely goes to Hamas, therefore lower their own legitimacy and power. Hence, most likely they would play it safe and let Fatah lead. This is also help in negotiating process with Israel. This is directly clashing with OPO. Israel always want two-state solution. Why is it the case? Because the Palestinian population outnumbers the Israeli population. And if Israelis stick with a democracy while overrunning Palestine, for example, and they have to be a democracy to gain the West sympathy anyway, they would lose the election to the Palestinian people. And the last thing that they want is the Israeli government ruled by Palestinian. Even Yasser Arafat said that the biggest Palestinian weapon to not get overrun is their woman's womb, for example. But if you want a two-state solution, you need a negotiating partner in Israel. The alternative is exactly Hamas only. No way they would negotiate because they are recognizing Hamas as terrorists. Therefore, they have no choice. They would negotiate with Palestinian Authority anyway. In fact, we are going to flip the OO's logic and said that the Palestinian Authority collaborating with Hamas is exactly what Israel wanted, because any progress in peace deal always in status quo sabotaged by Hamas, and in return they have to revenge by putting military action or are seen as weak by their own people. But in reality, no state has been benefited by prolonged war, neither does Israel. Hence, with Hamas co-opted and cannot sabotage, it would lead to more productive negotiation, and the legitimacy of Palestinian Authority increased because Israel and the West negotiated with the entire Palestine, not just half of it. Hence, the legitimacy inside and outside the state will be better. How do you weigh this contribution? One, we are the only team that has grounded goal and clear mechanization to achieve it. And secondly, we managed to prove that the only way to achieve long-lasting peace while PA stay in power is exactly by collaborating. Propose.
Now the speaker for the fan speech to open the case of CO calling upon member of OP. Time is yours. See here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, and visible.
All right. Yeah, I to unmute. Okay.
Hi, sorry, it's audible now. Thank you.
All right, Mo, you can start.
Tadi udah bilang belum sih? POI to unmute dari opening, if not closing, perfection penang share. Alright. Let's kick out the opening debate. We think that they're both unrealistic. The gravity of harm on OG has been very undermined, that if they lose, at least that they put on a fight when there's so many innocent people that die in the process, and many people that are supposed to get their right are seen as now contributing to violence. Or is also taken for granted because their benefits contingent on the solution of ceasefire, which is very unrealistic in the first place. The framing on CO is two things. Firstly, then this is not a debate about who can stop Israel, because even when government is able to collaborate with Hamas, they're still unable to win because the number of power, as all benches has conceded, is very is asymmetrical. Therefore, the debate is about minimizing harm. Secondly, we think that once you seek collaboration with Hamas, you are seen as aggressive and hostile because you actively justify the violence. You can what we want on CO is that you want to maintain the victim image, so the support will still be here. But set up under CO is two things. Firstly, we think that the counterfactual, even without working with Hamas, you still likely to have progress and support for Palestine. This only asserted by OO. We think that what happened is in three manifestations. Firstly, countries have started to divert investment. Many countries start to cut off ties with Israel, like Luxembourg, New Zealand, Norwegia. Secondly, like they're also boycotting against Israeli companies, something that is accessible and done by the people, and it's also start to cause damage to the funding towards the military coming from this company. And thirdly, like anti-Zionist Jews have also started to condemn and fight against Israel. We think this is necessary and effective to be able to cut down for military budget, urging the government, urging Israel, for example, and condemning them, right? We think that on our side of the house, what we want to clarify is that Hamas and PA is not always in a tense relation, because if in the status quo now, there's already an attempt for them to reconcile. But look, this is different from collaborating, right? Because when you reconcile, you're aware of each other's presence, but you don't work together. You still use different ways to fight the oppressor. Therefore, we think that the harm coming from CG about the execution of Hamas is going to resort to extreme ways and escalation. It's not. It's likely to be still happen. It's likely to even happen worse on their side. But even if that's true, for example, if the relation is very tense and very oppositional, we know that it's likely to be worse on their side of the house because it causes internal unrest and conflict among Palestinians because you divide the Palestinian from the first place. But I would say it's also even worse because now the civilians is also for example, wanting to see that you are a state that's divided and polarized. We think that on government, if they argue that Hamas want legitimacy, if they actually collaborate with PA, they don't want to be under the control of PA. They want to show what they actually want for the state itself, right? So extension on CO is we are going to say that working with Hamas will validate Israel to be more violent, and we think that this is over opening benches because they never answer why, for example, even if they're more validating, for example, there's still incentive or there's less incentive for people to want to support Palestine, for example, and it's going to affect the support coming from the global itself. We think that once you have bad perception coming from working with Hamas, exactly because OG said that we're likely to demonize them anyway, we think it's even worse. The manifestation is even worse. Firstly, we think that the association of violence in general makes it easier for pro-Israel camp to want to use Hamas as a rallying point against Palestine. This means that you affirm Israel framing that the reason they allow to bomb hospital is because of Hamas. They kill children because these children are also supporting Hamas. This means that only justify war atrocities that has been done by Israel military, which leads, for example, for people to fund even more or justifying the funding going for this military. Secondly, the voters will see that sanction and also more punitive action against Palestine will be more justified because Palestine is also now starting to become violent in the end. And thirdly, we need the belief that where Hamas, for example, is already been demonized in the first place, which is that once you associate yourself with them, you're likely to have to cater to this image too and influence with that. This is why we think that the demonstration that OG posits will be tremendously even worse. But the impact is also going to be worse in three folds. Firstly, it creates reduced support for the Palestinian state. We told you that if Hamas has a bad reputation, now the whole Palestine is also likely to get sanctioned. This is particularly bad because they don't will have even worse resources for food, medicine, or aid, for example. Secondly, that when Israel get even more funding and military aid from US, now they are seen as having the right to defend themselves. People, the reason why people support Palestine now is because they're seen as the victim. This is the missing analysis in OO and only exclusive CCO, because we told you why it's very important to be seen as the victim, for example, in order for you to be able to dissociate yourself within Hamas and Palestine in order for you to be able to receive this support. Thirdly, I think that's also the perception where there's also political instability, exactly because, for example, exactly because you are unable to, you only want to seek the resolve, for example, in individual level, we think that on government side of the house, you're only to get resources because, for example, there will be less charities that want to send resources to Hamas, for example, because they don't want to support Hamas, therefore they don't want to give this to Palestine. The conclusion here is that what we want to maintain is when you have the image as a victim, you're on government, you'll be seen as you are actually waging a war instead of occupation, and you're taking away the rights of people. On our side of the house, you stay as victim, for example, but the global support is likely to help you, and that's why it's the way for you to minimize the harm that caused towards the civilians and also towards the country as a whole, right? Yeah, we think that is the only way for you to get support from the global country and using it against Israel. So I think this is also clashing with Gigi's point, right? We think that collaboration will make Palestine bad as a whole, even if they argue that that Hamas is going to be moderate. We think that's very less likely. Firstly, because as they already considered about how Hamas is already a majority of a vote, which means that now if you actually let the Hamas, for example, to also come take part with PA, it means that you're likely to lose that sovereignty that you have. For example, you're going to, for example, lose the power exactly because you're going to be overshadowed by Hamas. Even if Hamas is being moderate, we think that's very less likely because they already feel that, oh, now even the PA also wanting to cater to us and they acknowledge our power, which means that there's also incentive from Hamas, so they want to do this or this. Sorry. Yeah. So this is why we think that now when you give the power towards now you are actually affirming that you are giving the harm to Hamas, and secondly, we think that exactly because they're the most politically associated with the image of Palestine as a political body. Now that when you try to merge with them, even if you want to descend the image between the Palestinian and PA and also the Hamas, you're very hard to do so. Exactly because thirdly, there's media, for example, and polarized domain media that always associate Palestine, PA, for example, as Hamas together. Now the right wing discussion that dominate political consensus will see that, oh, everything that Hamas do is also associated with PA, for example. This means that the sabotage, this is why you think that when they want to say that you are likely to sabotage, for example, you are unable to sabotage, we think that this is not likely to resort to even more harm, which means that on their side of the house, if you actually want to say that, oh, the harm here is that Hamas is going to be moderate, we think that it's very less likely to do so, because as what they want to claim about how there's already, for example, many polarization, there already, for example, like violence that comes from Hamas itself. We think that if it's as tense as they want to portray, we think that's harmful, even harmful on their side. But if they're actually moderate, we think that's even better on our side of the house because they don't associate with each other. They're able to have a different way to fight and approach against Israel to oppose.
I then speaker for the final speech to close the case of government calling upon GovFIP. Time is yours here.
Hi, check, am I both audible and visible?
Yes, you're visible.
Right. Thanks for the confirmations. For POIs, probably unmuting might take one from opening. Right. We're gonna start in 3, 2, 1. I just want to make sure that CO is out because their sense is just presumably just want to take a neutral stance. But the problems are, 1, this means as PA you reject the wave riding of Hamas popularity to defend Palestinian, meaning that you are presumably will be perceived as public enemy because this is not the time to be neutral. This is a time to take stance whether you want to comply with Western or whether you want to defend Hamas, because this is a black and white conditions and PA is between of it. Meaning, one, if you're neutral, you are likely to be perceived as a Western ally and lose the trust from your people in the next election. And presumably the people around the West Bank will hate you and opt into another option that do not give them tokenistic idea. Secondly, they claim that the image from Hamas is bad because of demonization. But crucially, this is based on Western prescriptions, not based on other countries' prescriptions. I would argue the image of Western is currently super duper bad because of things such as unfair condition and picky political stance and military aid, such as they are giving massive military support to Ukraine but not Palestine. They've broken projects that counteract their ideology, such as Willow Project that exploit Antarctics that make the image become significantly bad. This means inside of the incumbent government, outside of the incumbent government, the society is currently aware throughout social media discussion that Western is evil. This means when you sided with unpopulist sides, all the harms of taking out your political legitimacy in Israel, as what Jason explained, can run smoothly without any significant response. But MO responses by saying that the Hamas is unlikely to be moderate. One, this is not a net harm. If Hamas constantly becomes so radical recklessly, then people from Palestine would trust PA more because Hamas is playing with their life randomly. So this is even a net benefit. But secondly, our benefit of riding the popularity of international discussion is super important because the moment just came once, presumably not coming twice. I'll talk about two issues. First, political legitimacy. Second, international aid. Firstly, let's about political legitimacy. OR responded my POI by saying that we do not want Palestinians to be united, so the conflict resolution is better when Hamas and PA is conflicting each other rather than Israel versus Palestinian. One, this is a suicidal framing. This is not a third-person perspective we should not care about the united between Palestinian and Israel, simply that is impossible and unrealistic to be achieved based on historical negotiation precedents that had no progress, which means what we should actually care is the interest from the actor, which is PA. We explained that in most cases, one, they want to collaborate simply because they want to stay relevant in Palestinian political context. Jason explained that throughout the most cases, Palestinian in the election is actually in favor with Hamas by winning the majority of the election seats in 2006. That makes Fatah protested the election as unfair. And this is true because one, Palestinian is tired of tokenistic negotiation from PA with Western that brings zero result, i.e. Israel still building settlement around West Bank, trying to disenfranchise Palestinians by making it difficult for them to establish building by prolonging administration process. Or Palestinian wants a real concrete actions. Even if it's true things such as war, they want their land to be taken back. And the one that represents the progress the most by gaining more international sympathy is not PA, but instead it is Hamas. So this proves why most likely international community care more about Hamas, and so do people in Palestine in contrast to PA. This means that in most cases, PA wants to gain relevancy because of their past precedents of failure in negotiation approach, and this is the right moment to do so. Why? Because there's a certain urgency from PA to gain political legitimacy and Hamas to gain military aid and funding. This is important because this is also answer MO concern why they are likely to working together, because currently the money that Hamas get is just throughout international funding and donation, which probably not really significant to fund the war against the superpower Israel, which backed up by US, to the point where we can hold them to not bring massive collateral damage or make the war become significantly unbalanced. This means there is a common sense with PA and Hamas that both is actually need each other, and this is the right moment to form connection and collaboration, flipping the case from MO. You weigh the political legitimacy as the most important consideration in this debate based on 2 points. One, OG claimed that I could agree to some extent that we need to defend ourselves from Israel and US intervention, but the problem between OG claim is that they do not explain why Hamas and PA is likely to form a collaboration. They just suggest and ignore the historical context that both have a massive historical tension, such as election in 2006, that makes the entire Palestinian area split into the government. We explain why the collaboration had the potential of success, which is a priori analysis, because the fiat of this motion just apply only in seeking but not directly collaborating. Therefore, the likelihood for them to get along together should be way a priori than any contributions from the other teams. But secondly, the two-state solutions in OO is a suicidal contributions. This debate does not happen in vacuum, but rather in status quo. Therefore, the idea of never-ending conflict resolutions that happening in their side is just unlikely to manifest because Hamas is the one who started the war, not Fatah. The best way for you to counterbalance Hamas' aggressive behavior is by make them as close as you can with PA. Second issue then, let's talk about the international aid. All claim that if they are collaborating, it will bring a never-ending war. So to solve this is the ensuring the livelihood because this is government responsibility. This contribution is contingent on moderating Hamas because the one that will always go into war is likely Hamas and not PA. Jason explained that if there is no counter-influence, Hamas is likely to be far more extremist. But I would argue that this is the opposite on our side based on several reasons. One, if they are uniting, meaning they will collaborate to arrange the country administration and military purposes, which means the Hamas would also become the part of security unit in things such as West Bank. So they are unlikely to make irrational decisions because the area coverage that you need to cover is bigger. But secondly, we explain that in most cases, Palestine is tired, not only because of conflict between Hamas and Israel, but also Hamas and PA. Things such as multiple assassination attempts, Gaza takeover in 2007, etc. This means your only obligation relying on check and balancing Hamas by making sure that the invasion, the attacks, etc. is launched strategically. If you want to do things such as self-defense in the first instance, because Hamas also need PA money and international recognition, so they are likely to be moderated and achieving that OO moral obligation that they talk about, and to some extent that CO derive. But secondly, the counterfactual of alternative is negotiating with Western. My question is, this is just simply impossible. OG explained that Hamas is strong. We explained that Hamas is weak. Therefore, they need PA as a backup. Therefore, in the end, they still need an international aid a lot. The problem is, Western will not have Palestinian in their side. Because one, every discussion of Palestine already being shut down by Western in sport events, social media, etc. If you explicitly show your interest to support Hamas, you might be banned from social media. But secondly, there is no explicit help to the Palestine. We saw a lot of people demonizing Israel, but UN still did not react to make Israel as a war criminal. Thirdly, they have the ability to declare the negotiation and ceasefire right after Bush launched the attack, but Joe Biden did not do anything and allow Israel to do genocide. This means, one, the negotiation idea does not work. We need to unite to make sure the Palestinian is not persecuted, co-opt the benefits of moral obligations, and we make it better with practical outcomes such as political relevancy and legitimacy from Palestinian Authority. But secondly, we do not take an extreme case like OG because we do not have an epistemic access to predict whether we could win the war currently. What we have is the idea of self-defense and the political relevancy. This is important because most international community and society, not the government, by the way, like in UK, is pro-Palestine. In US, you saw massive demonstration in various states, so you're likely to get reputation and presumably trust from the other Palestinians because of social discourse. Therefore, you are likely to get the benefit, i.e. long-term relevancy and consistency to get trust and presumably funding from international society altogether based on the civilians' agreement. In the end, what was certain is protection and safety. We prove why it brings you relevancy proposed.
And then the speaker for the final speech to close the case of OP. I'm calling upon OP Whip Tamishorsi here.
Check, am I clear?
Yes, you are.
Okay, PRI, unmute yourself, setting my time first. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Judge opening cannot win the debate. They keep talking on how they want to stop the war, but both sides agree on how hard it is to stop this war. Like Judge said, this is the debate about minimizing the harm. Because of that, CO will win this debate. First, one clarification towards CG. They're talking about how under our CO we are neutral and this is bad. We are not neutral. We are still fighting for Palestine. They just don't listen to you. So we just don't associate ourselves with Hamas, different with waging war against Hamas that make them become more violent at the end of the day. But what we posit is on Gov, you are seen like taking stance, but actively escalate and prolong the war. Like, for example, we already told you about US aid Israel $1.7 billion on government side of the house, on CG, on OG. They will strengthen Israel in war against Palestine because it will justify them to do what they do, which is like, it will be in big that will be in big in magnitude, right? Like more weapon, more people dying because war become longer. That's why we are not neutral. We still fight for Palestine, right? On CO, we are clear. First, we don't want justifying Israel and all the narrative that exists because if we do collaborate with Hamas, i.e., if Israel attack any hospital or some kind of school or shelter, it will justify their narrative that's saying like, oh, it's okay, we bomb them because the kids and the people they are helping Hamas and are on one side with Hamas at the end of with the violence that's created by Hamas, right? And why is this bad? A, Israel got more funding because now it's already justified by the society, and also America will fund more. B, Palestine got lesser support from the other country, from the other nation, because now we are simply aligned and have a collaboration with terrorists, which is most of the country will not want this. That most country that help Palestine will not want this thing to happen, right? Two, I think we want to stick at status quo. We want the world to see us as a victim of Israel, become vulnerable actor, because there is already progress in status quo, and we can say it's a good progress without we directly collaborate with Hamas. In example, there is so much nation that cutting relations with Israel, anti-Zionist Jews, already starting protests against Israel. Many countries siding with Israel, boycotting Israeli or pro-Israel product, and many others. Right? We say by not associate with Hamas, the progress under the House will still be there, and will not prevent the harm, and we will prevent the harm that will come under the side of the House. Right? Let's move on to OG then. I will explain to you on why OG case cannot run and not exclusive under the side of the House. OG burden are too big. Their benefits are contingent if they win the war under OG. They say it themselves. I will explain to you on why both sides of the House they will still have the chance of winning, and it was likely on the side of the House. About on how acting vulnerable not beneficial. They said this is important, and where Jose cases comes in, right? We say if we keep acting vulnerable and nice, we will gain support from other country. Like even if OG said, oh, not working because of media and US, it will not gonna working, right? It's not true. Check at the status quo. We already explained to you on why there will be progress, like support, like Indonesia giving support to Palestine in like blanket, etc. There is so many support under the side of the House. Under the side of the House, they want to be aggressive. Judge not that they will be joining and siding with terrorists. Jose cases already flipped this, where Jose say how the word at the end will justify Israel doing attacks. So their case about will getting external party help will not work at the end of the day, because now the whole world will justify Israel in doing their attacks because of this, right? See, exactly because of that, we say Israel will keep attacking everyone, like hospital, school, etc. Because now they seem all Palestine as one with Hamas, right? And I think the last thing is OG really undermined the harm that happened. They really contingent on winning the war, etc. So they cannot win this debate, right? And secondly, they talk about how Hamas is powerful. They have the capability, strategic, and also engage. It will also engage to CG talking about how they want to show the power, right? It's not exclusive. Judge which one is more powerful. Help from more and more country, or simply Hamas. We say if they collaborate with Hamas, it will mean they will cut their relation with other country. All the support, like how the food and other help, will be gone, because simply many countries don't want to align with terrorists and really not inside with Hamas, right? It will only justify Israel on what they do. Under the side of the House, yes, maybe they gain a bit of power with Hamas, but under the side of the House, if we want to fight, it will be better under the side of the House, because many nations will support us, not only Hamas, and support towards the civilian, like how Indonesia send blanket and food very much to Palestine, is the same important as what they trying to say, right? There will be also military help that are much stronger under the side of the House, like Russia are starting to send help. By that we already flip OG case and make their benefit exist and better under the side of the House. I think more notes is added under OG, because now Israel attacks already being justified. There will be more support to Israel. We already explained to you about this, about how America will add more support to Israel, because simply now it's justified. So OG loses this debate. Let's move on to OO. Yes, first OO explained on how it will escalate the war and the tension between Israel and Palestine, but OO failed to explain to us on how under OP status quo is fine and there is progress under opposition. Under CO will already explain to you, just already told us on how mechanization of support and current support on and a lot of example and characterization. In example, there is so much nation that cutting relation with Israel, etc. By that, this is the whole that we feel from OO. Second, I think OO also failed to present us on how the support, or simply their case about how the war will escalate and how will be many casualties, etc. happen under the side of the House, and how this will be harmful for Palestine at the end of the day. They don't explain this. Under CO already told you on how we simplistic collaboration with Hamas means that we will seen as aggressive and be seen for like seeking for war, right? Under CO, we also already explained to you on why the aggressiveness happened. It's because simply on Gulf they justify Israel to attack Palestine. This is why at the end the benefit that already exists in status quo will be gone. OO failed to explain this. The last thing, I think OO also we also feel the OO we also feel on how we're becoming victims is very important in this status quo and can help us minimize the harm that we will know. Right. So lastly, let's move on to C. They're talking about how if collaborate, Israel want to negotiate toward the government, because Israel don't want to negotiate to terrorists, right? I think CG never explained on how the extreme side like Hamas suddenly want to become moderate and want to join the Palestinian government. That's not that their benefit is contingent on their mechanization. That they never explain under closing government that the mechanization on how they can make this Hamas moderate. They never explain under CG. That's why we think their cases cannot run. And we told you that how it's likely become still radical at the end of the day. Even if they can collab with Hamas, can be more moderate. I think this case already be flipped since the beginning. I already explained on how it will only make Israel being aggressive because we will justify Israel if we collab with Hamas. See, we think even if at the end of the day Hamas can be moderate, which is very hard to happen, and she never explained to us on how Israel will likely to negotiate and see with the terrorists, just like they said, even if they have coalition with the government, we say at the end Israel will still attack Palestine because anyway Hamas still terrorists that being seen in the POV of Israel. That's why vote for CO.
And then the speaker for the final speech that remarks the end of this round. For all debaters, you can virtually shake hands and go back to the breakout room, to the main room, because the breakout room will be used by the judge to deliberate. Thank you, everyone.